Thank you very much for coming to this ePoster session. Well, it will be basically about diagnostics in invasive fungal infections. So we are, well, basically starting on speaking about different tests and lab-related stuff. My name is Salmanton-García. I'm the chair and also the first speaker. And well, I hope we all enjoy the session and we have fun speaking about diagnostic of fungal infections. So yeah, in my talk, I will speak about the current status of diagnostic and treatment capacity in Asia and the Pacific. Basically, this is work that was started some years ago in Latin America. It was replicated in Africa and then also in Europe. And then, well, we came to Asia and the Pacific. It was a pretty straightforward methodology. We developed an online survey where we were asking about the different diagnostic tools available currently for invasive fungal infection detection and also for the currently available antifungals. And then they just needed to log in the, or like go to the link and provide their information. In the case of Asia, we obtain information from 235 institutions in the whole continent here. And for the analysis, we distributed them in 3 groups based on their GDP, as we observe in other analyses, precisely in the case of Europe, that this was, or this could be a determinant for differences in the diagnostic and treatments. We divided them in countries with a GDP below $3,000 per capita, countries between $3,000 and $20,000, and countries with more than $20 of GDP per capita. And basically, between the questions we were asking, the first one was regarding the self-perception of incidence in their institution. We didn't see statistically significant differences, and in most of the cases, they reported low to moderate. Although it's true that in the cases from, or in the case of the countries with the highest GDP, it was more relevant, the number of institutions saying that the incidence of invasive fungal infections was very high. If we go, and I will skip the incidence of mucorales because I want to stick to the time. If we go to the access to microscopy, and we will see it together with the culture, we could see how there was no big differences between different institutions in the whole continent. And in both of the cases, almost 100% have access to culture and microscopy. More in detail in culture, we could see how there were statistically significant differences between the different groups in the access to CLSI and UCAS for the susceptibility test measurement. And now, if we go to serology, antigen test detection, and also the PCR, we can see how there are stars almost in every column. And here we can see a linear correlation or like a linear progression in the access to the different diagnostic tools depending on the GDP of the countries. And actually it's applicable in the case of the serology to all the different serologies, in the case of the antigen test to everyone except Candida and Cryptococcus species and also Histoplasma, and also in the access to the PCR. And interestingly, here we can see how not all the countries had the same access. I mean, like even in the richest or in the countries with the highest GDP, there are centers that are missing access to these diagnostic tools. And now if we move from the diagnostic tools to the treatment options to the antifungals, we will see how this tendency I mentioned, like a progression or a linear tendency from countries with the lowest GDP, middle GDP, and highest GDP doesn't continue. You can see how the countries with the lowest GDP have almost a similar access to liposomal amphotericin B as the countries with the highest GDP. In the other drugs, it's a bit different, but still we keep that tendency. Countries with the middle, so to say, GDP, then countries with the lowest GDP, and then countries with the highest GDP. And there is an explanation for that. If we go back to the map, we can see, or we can focus in two big size countries, India and China. And if we focus on India, the color it has, it's the one of the less than $3,000. With this, we can see how the fact that in the case in India, as many of you may know, the incidence of invasive fungal infections is much higher, and the physicians are aware of these incidents, can be, or actually we interpret it as related to the fact that the access to the antifungals is also higher. Nevertheless, it's also necessary to mention that the fact that you have one antifungal available in your country, and especially in the case of India, doesn't mean that your patient will get that antifungal, because then the patient needs to be capable of affording that antifungal. And now we go to the conclusions, and let's make them bigger. So yeah, basically the first of the conclusions is that the access to diagnostic and treatment tools for invasive fungal infections in Asia is pretty heterogeneous depending on the country. The second one is that collaborative efforts are necessary in order to gain this capacity that it's pending to be acquired, and therefore not only within the region, but also with other world regions. Thank you very much. Well, any questions? Okay, then we will move to the next speaker. I'm sorry.
Did you ask about dermatophyte susceptibility testing? And if you didn't, are you going to?
Yeah, we didn't ask specifically about dermatophytes, and definitely if we do like a new edition, so to say, of the test, it's one of the things we can ask about for sure. Thank you very much for the comment and the suggestion.